Welcome to Attican Plays Railway Empire. All right, welcome to another Railway Empire video. This is Attican, and this time we're going to do a follow-up to the fundamentals video that I just released about rapid expansion and a pass-through warehouse. And we're going to go back and do the gold rush scenario because it's such a perfect fit for that strategy. There's going to be the need to have a large footprint. We need to have 8 cities. We need to grow 8 cities. We need to, our initial task is to connect 3 cities, San Francisco, Shasta, and Carson City. So that's just sort of cries rapid expansion right there. And again, that footprint. And then there's tons of city growth in this one. This is all about growing 8 cities to a population of 80,000. So it's just an ideal scenario for showing what we're doing. Now, the only thing that's missing really are competitors. There are no competitors on this particular scenario. So the only setting I had really was reduced ticket prices. So we're going straight out. We follow our principle of meat. If you start with meat, go find beer. If you start with beer, go find meat. So we're going straight to Shasta, and that'll give us a great line, beer meat line, and it's even better. It's like I've got a bonus because in San Francisco, there is the Wells Fargo Bank, which has a demand for gold. In Shasta, there's a gold warehouse, which creates gold from the game's point of view. I guess the idea is that all the miners are out there, they bring it into Shasta, and it goes into this warehouse and then needs to be shipped to the bank in San Francisco. So we will have a beautiful line here because we'll ship the beer and the meat back and forth, and we'll get gold, and we'll be able to fill it off with passengers and mail. So we'll have a lot of full trains running, particularly going from Shasta to San Francisco. They'll be full virtually every time. And on the return, they'll do just fine as well. So this will be a really good line. It's a great way to start this particular scenario. So we're following our typical process of double track, point-to-point connection with supply tower right in the middle. Cut the middles in half with a couple of signals in order to create a couple more blocks, and then run trains. You don't make money in this game if you don't run trains. So we're going to run 6 trains back and forth between Shasta and San Francisco, and they will do a fine job printing money for us. Now we're going to go straight out to Carson City so we can get that first task out of the way as soon as possible. Again, we're going to use our small station, which is part of our rapid expansion strategy. We'll start out with a small station and connect it back to a second small station in Shasta. Now, part of the reason for using the 2 stations, of course, is to cut out your competition. But it's also, I just love the flexibility of having, when you have those 2 stations that can grow out in either direction. Now, whichever side I need to come in, if I need to bring something into Shasta, I can expand either station out away from the center and be able to quickly come up with the right connection. So it's just a beautiful way to really set yourself up for expansion later on by having those 2 small stations back to back. And I did, by the way, goof this one up at some point. I think it's in Sacramento. I turned my 2 stations so they're both facing the same direction. Bad. And I kind of cursed myself a little bit at some point for doing so. But worked out okay. Now, at this point, we went straight from Shasta, which is beer, to Carson City, which is also beer. Normally, you wouldn't do that with the rapid expansion. This is an example of how you have to modify to match the objectives that you're trying to meet. And so by doing that, we got our first task out of the way very quickly. And we have to grow Carson City. That's a big one. Grow Carson City to 100,000 very quickly. That's a big requirement of this whole scenario. And really, the idea of getting meat to Carson City is one of the big challenges of this one. I'll show you how we're going to deal with that in a little bit. But at any rate, we're going to set up a line here between Shasta and Carson City. It'll be just fine. It'll make us really good money. We're going to run 6 trains again this time because it's a long line. Not so much that it's a great line with beer and meat, but because it is a long line. So we're going to run 6 trains back and forth between Shasta and Carson City. They'll do just fine, make us a good profit. And even though it's beer to beer, it's okay. And sometimes you do what you got to do. Okay, so now we're going back to our beer meat principle. We've got beer up in Shasta. We've got meat in Sacramento. So we're going to run a beer meat line between Shasta and Sacramento. It'll be a dandy. It'll make great money for us. It won't cost us a fortune. In fact, it's a fairly cheap line. And we would have done this prior to Carson City had we not had that objective to get to Carson City so quickly. And I think I actually failed to expand that station, so shame on me there. But it just shows you also you can kind of get away with that because the trains are not hitting that frequently into the station. So if they do share a platform from either direction, it's not the end of the world. We got a connection bonus here, so we're going to be cheap and grab it. We're just going to hook it into the line, the short little line. We're not, in fact, we don't use this particular one for a long time. In fact, there's a point where I actually forget it's there and then realize it later and fix it. Yeah, here we've got this line coming in and sharing a platform. And it works out just fine, but would have been better to have expanded that station and had an open platform. And to reiterate something I said on the fundamentals video about rapid expansion, I don't use the put 1,000 signals between my lines where I'm running city to city lines because I want the trains to spread out. So again, I typically put a tower in the middle, then split the halves in 2 with a couple of signals on both ends. So that gives me 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. That gives me 10 places for trains to stop, which means I could run theoretically 9 trains. Of course, we don't want to run that many; it'd be too crowded. But if you've watched my videos, I'm not shy about running trains. In fact, here, even though this line is under 140 and these trains are decent trains, we're running 6 trains there because we've got the gold and the beer. The cities are going to grow and have more and more freight to ship. So I loaded this one up. I put 6 trains on it, which maybe it's a little too many, but I'm telling you, the money rolls in. Okay, now I'm trying to just get an idea of what's it going to cost for me to get meat over to Carson City so that we can get this growth going. So we've got meat in Sacramento, and there's a couple of things you could try. You could try actually running a long meat line from like Kingman or Salt Lake City or Milford or someplace like that, or you could try buying out something and putting in like in Bodie, you could buy out the beer that's there and put in your own meat, but then you'd have to run a long line to get the cattle to the meat factory in Bodie. So the easiest way is take advantage of what you already got, of course. And if you do it just right, you go through that little pass right there and down into Carson City. This actually turns out to be not terrible. It comes out around 650 to go through the mountain. And I can also tell you that you have to go through the mountain if you want to ship from Sacramento to Carson City. If you don't believe me, try building a line from Sacramento, go around the mountain and come back down. You know, like go up to Shasta and go around the mountain and come back down. Nothing will ship because you are now running a line that is not a more attractive line than just having the freight and the passengers and mail go on a land route through the mountains, through a mountain pass. So, you know, that's not depicted on the game, but they do tell you in the hints and tips that, you know, your rail line has to be quicker or shorter or both. Well, if it's shorter, it certainly would be quicker, but it has to be quicker than taking a land route or you can't move anything. So I could have meat in Sacramento that just literally would not ship to Carson City if I ran that big long line. So that's why you got to go through the mountain if you want to ship over there, because those cities are close together as the crow flies, as long as the crow's up pretty high to get over that mountain. So we're looking at that, and I actually thought about that. I'm kind of waiting right now to accumulate some cash, and I do have a second thought here and say, you know what, we need to get back to our rapid expansion. This is all about this is a rapid expansion video, so let's get back to rapid expansion. But we will come back to that shortly. But we're going to move over to another. Now, this is by the way, just quickly, I've said this before, my favorite research on this particular time frame is to get the Red Dragon. It's my favorite train in this time period. And because it's a decent freight train, far superior to what else is out there. Now, my strategy did not include grabbing Elko, but there's a connection bonus there. So if they're going to give us a connection bonus and practically pay for connecting, then certainly we can be kind enough to run a line and make money off it. So that's what we're going to do here, is just being opportunistic and grab a connection into that station that we'd actually originally put down to think about our Sacramento line. But it's there, so let's grab it and take advantage of it and grab that bonus. So they gave us 118, and it's going to cost us, 40 and what's it going to cost? 40 and about 80, 160, and maybe 200 grand. So they paid, the bonus paid for more than half of the line. So this line will pay for itself very quickly. In probably 6 months or so, it'll be completely paid for. And then everything after that's pure profit. And even though it's beer to beer, which is not ideal, it will make good money. It will ship passengers and mail. And eventually, as either city grows, particularly Carson City, we know it's going to grow. As Carson City grows, there will perhaps be opportunities to ship some freight. But no matter, because since it was a half-off deal, so to speak, it was a good investment.
It attracts many gold seekers here, and for many of them, your trains are the transport.
So we had an early task to haul a bunch of passengers, but because we've set up 4 good lines, we had no problem doing that. So we've already hauled our passengers. You can see there we've got a target. We haul some freight, but we've got good freight going in all our beer meat lines, and we've also, well, both of them. And then, of course, we've got that bonus with the gold, so we've got beer meat and gold being moved back and forth, so no problem. Now we're entering the next phase of rapid expansion. So The rapid expansion strategy, the second phase, is what we call the wheat cattle phase. And that's where we take all of our beer lines and hook them up with cattle, make sure they have good supplies, make sure we're making the money for bringing the cattle into the city. And we hook up all our beer industries to wheat, so that again we're making the money and make sure that their supplies are good, and that serves multiple purposes. One is, of course, it is very good money. These are short lines, they run frequently, and you make full freight prices no matter how short the line is. So these are great investments, and they multiply because they also make sure that your beer and meat industries keep producing. That means that those goods have to be shipped, and sure enough, our beer meat lines start shipping those goods back and forth, and we make money on the shipment of the goods. So this is this phase 2. So phase 1 is rapid expansion. You go out and grab 4 or 5 cities as quickly as you can. Now phase 2 is the wheat cattle phase, where we're going to connect up, like I said, the beer and the meat industries. So we ran a regular train station there because we want to run off in 2 directions. We're going to connect up to Sacramento and to San Francisco. And here we decided to go, wanted to leave some space over there to the right, to the east. So we're going to expand that station out to the west and run it. And again, that's where I really like that, is back-to-back small stations, so that you have the flexibility to decide which way you want to go at each point in time. We've connected up our 2 meat industries with cattle. Now we're going to connect wheat to our 2 beer industries, which happen to be in Carson City and in Shasta. And that one wheat farm that's in kind of up against the mountains there, inside our track, so to speak, is just ideal for this, because we can run it in both directions and send wheat directly to both of those cities that are producing beer. So once that's done, once we get this one done, we will have basically completed our little cattle, what am I trying to say, wheat cattle, the wheat cattle phase, because we will have direct connections, wheat to our beer industries and cattle to our meat industries. Now all those industries should flourish. And as I said before, that means our shipments are going to start getting better and better as well, or stay strong, because we're going to continue to have freight to ship. Now this one, I decided it's a borderline. I could have probably just run one line, one train, and saved the money to not have to double track. But because it's Carson City, and because Carson City has to grow, don't want to take any chances, so I'm going to double track it and go ahead and run another train just to make sure that we keep it supplied. If you noticed back in the Sacramento hookup with the cattle, I only ran a single line and didn't even double track it because I knew it was a short line, and the thinking is that a single train will keep that city supplied with the cattle that it needs. I was hoping that would work here, but I looked at it and the time it would probably be okay, but let's double track it or double train it and be sure. Now we're going to go down here and connect up with Shasta. So we expand the station. On the inside, again, that flexibility is so great because now we can go to the inside where we need to go. and we can loop ourselves around the mountain and go to the wheat and hook it up. And we will have to double track this because this is a long run. It's much too long to, they're definitely going to need multiple trains to keep a beer industry happy with this long a line. And again, back to remember our freight income fundamentals video, that idea that you get the same pay no matter what. Just here's a great example of how, this longer line will cost us more investment, more track, more trains, and won't make us any more money than the shorter line going to Carson City. So the short freight lines are the way to go in Railway Empire.
You have already transported a large amount of goods.
All right, so we've finished all three of our early tasks, and so we're off to a great start. And that's honestly, that's not surprising. The rapid expansion strategy is strong, and it's such a good fit for this particular one. Just a few variations, beer to beer, Shasta to Carson City, hook up Carson City third so that you get that task done early. But the general approach is very strong, and it just all seems to fit well. And I'm really looking forward to exploring this further and really trying to perfect it so that we have something to build on. Now, what I did here is something I should have done before. I should have had two lines running out of what am I trying to say? Running out of that wheat, so that if one or the other of the cities is not quite ready for another shipment, it doesn't hold up the other city. So I'm going to fix this so that we have lines running into each of the platforms, one going off to Carson City, one going down to Carson City, one running around to Shasta. And I should have done this right off the bat, but fixing it now. Okay, so we followed our rapid expansion strategy through the first two phases, and now we're actually going to go back to the first phase because, again, remember, we have to get 8 cities connected up and growing. So we're going to, and we have a requirement to run express trains between San Francisco and LA. It's actually an optional requirement, but it's there, and we might as well get everything. So we are setting up a line along the Pacific coast to connect up between San Francisco and LA, and we will eventually run this as an express line, passengers and mail only, with fast express trains, eventually. And our goal, of course, is to have an express connection because that's one of our objectives. And I decided here to back off for a second and stub out a little line here because I know that platform 3 there is intended eventually for Salt Lake City, I don't want to get in a situation where if I happen to build my LA line in such a way that it didn't give me any space and I got to do a bunch of deletions and stuff. It sort of pained me to do that because I had a pretty good line kind of planned out there from LA to San Francisco. Now I got to go do it again, but that's okay. And I actually ended up doing something I typically don't do on this map, which is go above or to the east of that cotton farm, and that worked out just fine. Usually I go around it. I stay on the coast for everything because, it'd be such a pretty train drive, right? What a beautiful train ride all along the coast from LA to San Francisco. Go through cross by Big Sur and everything. We still get the Big Sur part, but we kind of get away from the coast up there on the wrong side of that cotton plantation or cotton farm or whatever you want to call it. So here's an interesting thought about how to think about your bonds. We need over 300,000 to build that line, and obviously more than that to complete it. And our lowest hanging bond is 230. So here's a case where what you'd really want to do is save up the 230 or so and pay off the bond. And that would allow you to then issue a bigger bond, which is going to give you more money to work with and give you the funds that you need to work with, rather than saving the whole 300 and just building one side of that track, and then you still wouldn't be able to build the second side. But now because we've opened up a bigger bond, we've got more money to play with, and now we can get the entire thing finished as soon as we figure out what we did wrong and we got too close to that cotton plantation. So we'll go up the other side. So at any rate, the lesson there is if the money you need to do what it is you're trying to get done is greater than your cheapest open bond, close the bond. Then open a bigger bond, and you'll end up with more money. And you could even, of course, close both bonds if you wanted to, but that might take a little bit too long. It just depends on the criticality of doing what it is you're trying to get done right away. Now you notice here I'm going to set up supply towers, and that's and I think I'm going to add one block, but I want, again, these trains to spread out. And even though our goal here is to get an express train, I want these trains spread out. I don't want them running right on top of each other. I want them spread out, coming into the stations at regular and rather lengthy intervals to give passengers time to accumulate at the station, mail time to accumulate. And that way you make some money. If you were to say set up this line, use that control functionality, assuming you're not on Xbox. If you're on a PC, use that control functionality and you run signals all the way down through there. And then you just sat there in LA and fired out 6 trains. Well, they would just all run right behind each other like a big giant virtual train. And you just wouldn't make much money. It'd just be a waste of time. But by not having so many signals and by spreading out the trains are going to have better loads and they're going to do better for you. Now, here we're running the Dragon. We haven't started using the Dragon yet. We've researched it. By the way, to finish off my thought on that research strategy, I like to get the Dragon and then save for 3 stars for 300 points and then get the cheaper trains, and then you're really set. And then if you're playing as the Trickster, as we are here, you get her 20% discount, then you get a discount off the trains for that research, and now you can afford to really pump out the trains. And here we're running the Dragon because it's the fastest train we have, and our goal here is to get an express line. We need an express line. I think I said earlier it was an optional task. It isn't. It's actually one of the things we have to do to complete the scenario. So we want to get an express line between San Francisco and LA. And so we're going to run a train that's faster than anything else we've got out there. And we should be able to come up fairly quickly. It'll take a couple of 3 passes because they have to establish a time and then beat it in order to get an express rating. But we should have no problem getting express lines from that. And later on, as our research allows us to get a true express train, then we'll switch them over. So now I'm in one of those little quandaries. I'd love to build that line. I'd also love to own that industry. But then I'm looking and saying, well, all you could put in there is really a textile plant, and that doesn't turn me on that much. So I really want to get that line done because we got to start growing Carson City in earnest here, and they need meat. We need to have a supply of meat going to Carson City if we're going to grow it. And take note of how cheap that second side was. You've probably all experienced this. When you build a big tunnel or a big bridge, that first line is uber expensive. And the second one is not so bad because you've done all the heavy lifting. You've dug the tunnel. You're just expanding it now. So we're really in a good spot here. We've got our express trains. I actually wanted to run 8 trains there, so I only ran 6 to get our express. Now we've got express, so I'm adding 2 more in. And now we have a direct connection from Sacramento to Carson City. And we can start running, there we go, we just finished it. Sorry, I was a little ahead of myself. So we just got enough money to finish it off. And now we can set it up and run trains between Carson City and Sacramento. And the main thing for that right now in the early game is to get that meat going to Carson City. So it'll have beer. It makes it itself. We've got it. It's got wheat coming in to support the beer. It'll now have meat coming in from Sacramento, and we will soon move into our next stage where we start the growth of Carson City in earnest, and we'll actually do this with a little different technique. It's not time for our pass-through warehouses yet. Now, we could use a pass-through warehouse here, and I thought about it, but I decided to really do a focus growth on Carson City. So that'll be good too. So we can kind of see how you would really focus on growing one particular city. It's almost like literally it's impossible to have such a thing, but if you could have a one city cluster, this will be a one city cluster. This will be, focusing on Carson City coming up. But right now we're setting up that beautiful little line, and we're running the dragons here. Now I'm only running the Dragons on that express line to LA and here. Eventually we'll switch to all Dragons, but on all our lines except our express lines. But because of the inclination there, because we're going to have to go up the mountain through that tunnel and back down, so you're going to have to go up either both sides, a pretty steep angle. We want to run that attractive power of the Dragon. So now that we've got that done, we're going to look out here and expand some more and go out and pick up another city and go out to San Diego and hook it into our network. And I think we're going to wrap up this first section right there. And let me kind of give you a summary of where we are. We used the rapid expansion strategy. We quickly connected Shasta and Carson City, got good lines running. Then we connected Sacramento, got another good beer meat line running. Then we did our express line out to LA, got good profit out of that, by the way, and ran that as a passenger mail only. And then we did what is one of the keys to this whole thing, I believe, piling through the mountain with that tunnel and getting that line going from Sacramento to Carson City, which gives us a great beer meat run in on that one. So now we have two good beer meat runs. We have Shasta to, actually three. We have Sacramento to Shasta, Sacramento to Carson City, and San Francisco to Shasta. And we've got all that gold coming from Shasta to San Francisco. And it's probably worth noting, too, we're not worrying about the gold from Carson City, excuse me. We're not worried about the gold from Carson City. There's plenty of gold that's going to ship because we started it so early. We're going to get plenty of gold from Shasta to fulfill our requirements for shipping gold. And we don't need to go crazy trying to find some way to build some big expensive line to run San Francisco to Carson City. And what I'm doing here is I decided I'm just going to put in my warehouse right off the bat. Instead of running a line and then later on adding the warehouse, and we'll do a slight variation, we're just going to go straight for the pass-through warehouse. So we're going to set that pass-through warehouse up between LA and San Diego and have them be a little two-city cluster to grow with the pass-through warehouse. And this is actually a little early for doing this, but in fact what we'll end up doing here is I'll set these up to run through the warehouse, but they'll actually, the warehouse won't have anything in it. They'll just run passengers and mail back through, and they'll make a kind of an unnecessary, if you will, stop in at the warehouse. But that way the line's ready to go when we come back and actually start running goods. And also just one other quick note before I cut this off. We haven't done any maintenance yet. Not one maintenance shed anywhere, and you can see our economy is booming. I personally think that's a fault with the game. You should not be able to run trains without maintenance for, well, we're just now finishing our second year. So, I mean, look at how fast we've gone through all this stuff. We finished off all those requirements, and we haven't even hit the 2-year mark yet. So we are doing great. So let's just stop right there, and we'll pick it back up from this point in part 2. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it'll help you become a better player, and I hope you'll join us for our next Railway Empire video. Thank you.